were starting, wasn't it?
Nope.
Oh, okay. So, hello. This is Brad. I'm Kyle. We're both with Site 3.
Now, I'd like to start with a disclaimer. We are going to be sounding like we're pooing all over the Ontario College of Art and Design. We're going to be very hard on it because that's where we went and that's where the bulk of our stories came out of. But we don't hate the Ontario College of Art and Design. We learned some very valuable things there. I learned how to weld and solder, and I learned about electronics. We also learned that we had the right to do talks like this and say, you know what, art world, you're doing it wrong.
My biggest complaint with art is how very often the actual object is treated like a footnote to a very large essay. Someone will come up with a ridiculous idea that makes no sense. They'll have a whole bunch of jargon to obscure the fact that the idea makes no sense. Then they'll make a piece of art that somehow relates because they say it does. And they rely on something that I call the I don't want to look like an idiot principle. If you make something that is incredibly vague, that people don't get, they're always afraid to admit that they don't get it. They'll just assume that you're brilliant and compliment you. I was singing in a class critique. It was the end of the year. We'd had 4 months to come up with a major project. This was the thing that you've worked on all year. I'm looking at a sea of exhausted faces. This one bright-eyed student comes in, goes up to the plinth, places a single deflated red balloon, and goes on to talk for 45 minutes about how this is the epitome of expression for existentialism and the meaninglessness of life and the universe and everything, just going on and on and on. And a week later, I found out this student received the highest mark in the class. The majority of the class wasn't happy with this. So we all made a point of never, ever having anything to do with that instructor ever again. The small group that were very much into producing bullshit instead of good things stuck with this professor because, hey, we can get away with this. So inside the school, inside the art community, we started to have these two diverging circles of people. One liked to make cool stuff. The other liked to make crap and describe it as being really cool stuff. Now, there's a word to describe this one group of people. It's not coming to mind right now.
Ponder that for a second. Now, when speaking of what Kyle just talked about, what you end up with is artworks being produced solely to propel an idea. That's all that they're important for. And I really have a problem with that. Ideas are cheap. I mean, I could throw out something like swimming lessons for fish. It's an idea. I don't think it has any value, and somebody can feel free to disagree, and you can write a very long paper about it, but I think you're making my point more clearly instead of talking against it. Now, this is a story of mine from the Ontario College of Art and Design.
University. They changed their name.
There's no U on my diploma or my degree. I refuse to use it. Anyway. Okay, so imagine with me. You're standing in a room about this size with as many people, and you've been listening to presentations for the last 2 hours. People coming in after about 4 weeks of work and showing what they've done, showing what they've accomplished. And again, that sea of exhausted faces, because the majority of these people were working hard. Then the next student stands up, walks out into the middle of the room, and stands there. Now, this is someone that you would know as someone that has a difficult time giving presentations. They might have to steel themselves in order to get the nerve to start speaking. But then you realize that this person came to class empty-handed. There's nothing in the room that looks anything like what this person's done before, and then it starts to occur to you, and with creeping horror you start screaming in your head, no, 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 no. This person is trying to pass off nothing as an artwork. And then you start to see creeping horror come across the faces of the other people in the room as well, as they start to realize that this is going to be one of those. This is going to be a throwback to the 1970s. And let me tell you that someone did do that successfully. I wish I could remember his name. But he presented in a room invisible paintings, not like our invisible paintings, but non-existent paintings, and sold two of them. Now, this was in the 1970s where you could get away with that kind of crap. But 40 years into the future, in the 2005, 2006, I'm not so sure about that. So you get up, along with 3 or 4 of your peers, and you walk out of the room. Same sort of phenomenon happens. You hear later that that person got a fantastic mark. You have something to say there, Al.
You were that student?
And now for the next story. Again, have a look at that. Contemporary issues in the history of art. Now it's worth mentioning here that postmodern artists very often will say that there are no new ideas, that we must look to the past and revamp the past. And again, I have a problem with that. We have a problem with that. If you want new ideas, you've got to look at what's important now, at least. Now, this was a course at OCAD, and this also ties into a story from the University of Toronto this time. We had a friend that we went to high school with, fantastic painter. Landscape to abstract, everything in between, not a problem for her. In her first year course, she presented some strange amalgam of the two. A landscape that had been painted over a bit so that it had abstraction popping out at you almost. Painted in the style of Gerhard Richter. Now, for those of you that don't know who he is, imagine an abstract painting with a little bit of depth that you've now photographed, so there's areas of blur and areas of sharpness. They look really fantastic. And she did a really excellent job. She then presented this work to her class and her teacher. And she got ripped apart. This looked fantastic, yet she got ripped apart. She got a terrible mark and wanted to know why. I guess the teacher didn't articulate this very well. So she went and spoke to this teacher. And this teacher looked at her and said, "You're a woman. You have no right doing anything that has any semblance of craftsmanship associated with it. That history says that the art world was built upon the shoulders of men, and men were concerned with craftsmanship. So you should not be concerned with it." Chew on that for a second. She had the wherewithal to, off the cuff, say, no, you misunderstand. I recognize that this happened. I'm a woman. I'm critiquing this phenomenon. I'm saying that this phenomenon is wrong by being a woman and having the balls, if you will, to make something that is superbly constructed. Now, a smile comes across the teacher's face, and she proceeds to apologize to our friend because, "Oh, I didn't understand. You should have explained that to me. I'm so sorry. Here's the mark that you deserve," which was an A. I'm glad to hear groans in the room. I really do have a problem with the words that she used, magically changing this artwork from something that is garbage that you throw out sooner than look at to something that's of value, that's something that is gilt in gold. Now, our friend decided that the arts were not for her anymore at U of T, chose to use those golden words that she could muster and became a lawyer.
Have any of you ever worked with artists before? All right. How many of you agree with this statement? Yeah. I have a rule, don't work with artists, and I am one. You're an exception. You have a lot of nice tools. Here's a story that happened to me a few years ago. A friend of mine has a master's degree in studio practices. A master's degree in all the practical stuff you need to know to be an artist. She was having her first ever show after 6 years of school. She sent out an email, "Hey, how do I hang a painting? How do I print show cards? How do I do this? How do I present things? How do I space them?" All the practical stuff you need to know to be an artist. She has a master's degree in this, and she doesn't know the basics. There's something very, very wrong with an education system that can teach someone for 6 years take a whole bunch of money out of their pockets and still not give them just the basics of what they need to know to work within the system.
What is the solution? Well, we feel that we should be looking as artists at you, the public, you, the makers. We feel that we should really be considering what the public wants in art and what it is that they will like, what it is they won't like, and so on. Now, this is typically referred to as populist art, and that's a very bad word in the art world, and you're not allowed to use it. There's someone named Shea, Hembrey, and if you're not familiar with him, I'll go on about him near the end of the presentation. He has a principle called the Mima principle. And it states that if you can't spend 5 minutes and explain your artwork to your grandmother and have her understand, then you need to go back and rework it, rethink it, do something to make it more easily accessible. Now, many of you, I hope, are going to be spending some time at Nuit Blanche tonight. And I'm sure many of, if you are, you've heard that you can't see everything in one night, that it's physically impossible. And you, as the kind of people that you are, will probably say, challenge accepted. Which means that you have about 30 seconds per artwork, roughly, depending on how many there are tonight, and I have no idea of that statistic. But you might have 30 seconds per artwork, and in that time you have to be able to glean everything that that artwork has to say. You must be satisfied so that you can move on and get on with your night. Good luck. Now, last year, we put together a project called Take a Picture. And we had this in mind when we were designing it. Take 30 seconds, and in that 30 seconds, a person must be able to walk up to their artwork, understand it, and move on. And all you have to do, hold up your camera, and hey, look at that, there's an image that wasn't there before. You could go through that entire room in 30 seconds. Awesome, I understand what's going on, and move on. And that's what we're looking for, something that is simple, something that has depth if you need to dig for it, but has an outlet that can catch the widest margin possible.
One of the things I find, I think is probably one of the leading causes of art being crappy, is how criticism is entirely uncritical. Pick up a newspaper or a magazine and look for the restaurant reviews and read them. They're pretty harsh, pretty brutal. I found one that described a certain restaurant's food product as being as tasteless as a dead baby joke.
Oh, snap.
Now, pick up that same magazine, turn to the art reviews, and it's just a whole bunch of vague nonsense that is not getting critical. It's not making a single definite statement anywhere through the piece of text. They're treating it more like marketing than criticism. It's not, this is good, you should see it, this is bad, avoid it. It's, let's talk up everything just to get some people to come out and see it. And there's something that happens in nature, I think, is similar to this, where you'll get these little islands that'll exist without any predators. And the life that lives on these islands develops some really, really stupid, ridiculous habits. Because, hey, nothing's going to eat me, so I can have this ridiculous, colorful crest and make this long wailing call and have a mating process that lasts a month and a half. When you have a predator, you have to be good at things. So art criticism has become an island where there are no predators.
So, where does this leave us? This leaves us, I hope, with hope. Now, I mentioned Shea Hembrey first, so I'll talk about him for a little bit. And there's a TED Talk all about him called How I Became 100 Artists. And this is how we became familiar with him. Very shortly, he was so fed up with the art that he saw around him and how it lacked in craftsmanship that he decided that he was going to hold his own biennial. Meaning that he would invite people to show a body of work that took 2 years to produce. And looking for artists, he discovered that he couldn't find 100 artists to invite. So he did what any sensible artist would do and created 100 different personalities and 100 different art working styles. And over the course of a couple years, made work representing each of these unique artists. Photographed them, wrote a little bit about them, and then presented them in his own biennial. And I'm not doing him justice by describing, but seriously, search out his talk. There's another person, he works in Toronto. I'm not going to mention him by name because I don't have permission to do so, but he works at one of the big blue chip galleries, so the highest of the high commercial galleries in Toronto. He held a show that Kyle was involved with. And the way he decided how to have artists, or select artists, was different from what's typical. He went to Google, opened up Google Images, and typed in cool f***ing art. And what he came up with was a page of just images. No words, just here's what the painting looks like. And from that list of thousands, he's narrowed it down to 12. And those are the people that got invites. And it's interesting to note, and this, I think, gives strength to our argument, that all of these people that he picked were not represented by galleries. They were not a part of the traditional art institution. It's typical for someone like the gallerist to take submissions and then find 10 people that reinforce his or her sensibilities. And then from there, pick those 10 people and say, look at this art movement that's coming out of nowhere. How brilliant am I for pointing them all out? Now, I'm going to leave you on this. You, the makers, are also excellent people out in the world. You do awesome things for awesome's sake. You make things that are interesting because they're interesting, not because you want to propel a 100-page essay into the ether. So you stand to subvert the art institution, to kick out its legs, force it to the ground, and make it change. And I really hope that that happens. And just keep with the writing metaphor. If I'm a bad writer, or if I produce something that is that you're incapable of understanding, it's not because you're dumb. You're all very educated people. It's because I'm a bad writer. The same goes, I feel, for the art world. If I produce something that is visual and you don't understand it, does that make you dumb? No. It makes me a bad visual communicator. And what we're looking for is for people to force those bad visual communicators to straighten out. That's probably why they're the reason why you don't like art. They're the reason why we don't like art. Thank you.